It took some time, but we've reached the end of the series. Let's take a moment to see how it played out. The books take place immediately after each other. This leads me to believe that the overall story took place within the span of a few months, or maybe even a year. It's unclear to me. Now, Divergent and Insurgent actually fit together quite well. It makes sense for that to happen. Allegiant tied in nicely as well, but it felt like too much. See, while it is possible to write a series with one thing happening right after the other constantly, it's important to allow your protagonist to recover from what just happened. Triss never got to properly recover from what happened throughout her life, and Tobias only got to recover at the very end of Allegiant. Now, like I said in the Allegiant review, it is possible to make this structure work, but make sure to give your characters a little bit of time to take in all they've learned. Now, this might be a result of me not reading the series for a long time, but I didn't find many forms of foreshadowing. I'm not saying a series should have too much, but it should be just enough so that when you get to the part that was foreshadowed, you realize upon a second reading that you should have seen it coming. The secret of the abnegation was rarely mentioned in Divergent, but we knew that Divergence was important, and we knew it was powerful in Insurgent. Then we found out that being Divergent just means you're genetically pure. The whole Bureau of Genetic Welfare stuff that happened in Allegiant felt straight out of left field. I mean, sure, it was supposed to be like that, since it was a shocking revelation at the end of Insurgent, but I feel like there could have been an extra book in between Insurgent and Allegiant, going over what was happening with Evelyn and then building up to the Bureau being the bad guys. I don't know, just suddenly throwing in the Bureau and saying they're the new bad guys now doesn't flow right to me. But take the Hunger Games, for example. It has a similar situation where now a new entity has entered the picture and they're the new bad guys, but they're not painted as such at first. Plus, there's a little bit of a build-up to this rebellion in Catching Fire, and even in the Hunger Games, we knew that District 13 existed. The reason why the Bureau felt out of place is because while there are small hints that they might be going outside the city and Insurgent, it's brushed off as being minor. I feel like it didn't have as big a presence as it should have. Now there's one more thing I want to mention. I found this series fascinating in that the main protagonist you've been following is killed at the very end. You can actually tell that might be the case when you see that Allegiant is from the perspectives of both Triss and Tobias. You just have a feeling that one of them is going to die since it's the last book of a series, and since we've been following around Triss for the past 2 books, it has to be Triss. I actually liked that. It was done very well and left us with a satisfying ending. Now let's talk about the world. The faction system was painted out to be a good thing, and even the people in the Bureau believed that it was a successful method, but we learned over time that the faction system was still flawed. We don't get fully in-depth looks at each faction and the evils within them, but they were there, which can lead the reader to root for the heroes. Plus, there was more world added to give the bigger picture as to what's really going on. Sure, it might not have been introduced in the best way, but it still worked. Alright, let's get to the common themes in the series. This is a big one. There is corruption everywhere. It's an important theme throughout the whole series. In Divergent, you learn about how each faction is flawed and how Janine's influence caused a lot of people to die. In Insurgent, you get a brief view of how Evelyn was treating the factionless and how desperate she was. In Allegiant, you learn that the Bureau themselves were to blame for everything that happened. Nowhere is free from corruption. Tobias even says that a place without corruption doesn't exist. The bad guys are everywhere, and that's terrifying. The other biggest theme throughout the series is discovering your true identity. It starts out as Triss trying to find out who she is despite her divergence. It's clear from the beginning that a theme of Divergent can be allowing yourself to be different. Tobias says it point blank when he shows his tattoos of the symbols of each faction. He wants to have qualities representing each faction. He doesn't just want one faction to label him. Triss is starting to have those same feelings near the end when she realizes she doesn't belong to any faction. She's her own person. In Insurgent, Triss is still trying to figure out what it means to be Divergent. By the time we get to Allegiant, Triss and Tobias learn that everyone is human despite all of their faults. It's what persuaded Tobias to let Evelyn choose, and it's what inspired Triss to save Caleb's life, even though he betrayed her. Choice is another big one. Even on the book covers, there's always mention of choice and how one choice can change everything. And I've noticed that all the antagonists are always trying to take free choice away. Janine tries to mind control the whole city to obey her. Evelyn doesn't want any remnant of the factions to remain, to the point where she forces people to follow specific rules. David cares so little for the people in the city that he's willing to take away their memories in order to keep the experiment going. Tobias nearly removed Evelyn's choice to negotiate with Joanna, but he decided that wasn't the correct way to go. It's likely that if Tobias took away Evelyn's choice, there would be even more bloodshed, and Tobias would have lost his mother. Control has always been a common motive for antagonists in any series, but this one is clear that each antagonist is trying to remove the freedom to choose. I mentioned this in the Allegiant review, but sacrifice is also a theme in the series. Triss's parents sacrificed themselves to keep Triss alive. Triss sacrificed herself to wake up Tobias from the simulation. Now, Triss thought she was sacrificing herself to the erudite in hopes of stopping people from dying, but she realized that she was doing it for a selfish reason. The Abnegation have a saying that if the sacrifice is the ultimate way for a person to show you that they love you, you should let them do it. Triss actually sacrificed herself in Allegiant because she loved Caleb. Caleb was only going to do it because he didn't want to live with the guilt of betrayal anymore. If Tobias had wiped his memory, Triss's sacrifice wouldn't be remembered. Overall, I feel like the series could have been a little better flow-wise, and it could have used an extra book or a time jump to give our heroes a moment to understand the reality that they're living in. The Bureau immediately being the bad guys felt unplanned and thrown in there to create conflict. Now, it is true that if we didn't have conflict, we wouldn't have a story, but I feel like that could have been executed better. Plus, it likely would have helped to introduce the memory serum in one of the earlier books to help the readers understand its importance. That aside, I did enjoy the series. I thought the premise was very fascinating and the ending was satisfying. Every character gets their own special moments and it makes us think, which is what I believe science fiction should do. The Divergent series was a fun, entertaining read with a few hiccups toward the end. I did enjoy it, and let me know what you guys think of the series as a whole. Sorry I wasn't able to read 4 or We Can Be Mended, but let me know if you'd like me to take a look at those. I hope you had a good series September. I can't wait to see you guys next September. Happy reading! No. Not again. Never again!